Wait until you hear this, because even now, months later, I'm still reeling from the sheer audacity of my own flesh and blood. Picture this. I'm sitting across a massive mahogany table in a mediation office. You know, the kind of room that smells like expensive leather and unspoken lawsuits. And my younger brother, the person I practically raised, is staring me down, his face a mask of cold entitlement. He wasn't there to reconcile. He was there to take. He looked the mediator dead in the eye and, without a shred of irony or gratitude, demanded half of the business that I built from absolutely nothing. Not a loan, not a partnership offer, but a demand for 50% equity. Just like that. The silence in the room was deafening, the mediator's pen hovering over his legal pad. I just sat there, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white, thinking, this is the line. And then, I showed the mediator one single document, a piece of paper that had been sitting in my briefcase for months, waiting for this exact moment. And what happened next? My brother's face completely crumbled. He went from a snarling pit bull to a whimpering puppy in 2 seconds flat. You have to tell me, honestly, after hearing the whole story, was I too harsh, or was this the only way to finally make him understand the true cost of his betrayal? To really understand why a document, just a piece of paper, could dismantle a years-long family feud and a massive legal demand, we have to go back to the beginning, back before the business even existed. I'm the older brother, 7 years older, and our childhood wasn't easy. Our parents, bless their hearts, were loving but perpetually broke, chasing one failed get-rich-quick scheme after another. It meant that from the time I was a teenager, I was the de facto adult. I paid for my own clothes. I worked the graveyard shift at a convenience store through high school, and when my brother Mark came along, I was the one teaching him to tie his shoes and helping him with his geometry homework. Mark had a relatively carefree childhood because I shielded him from the financial stress. I saw it as my duty, my older brother privilege. I poured all my energy into ensuring he had the opportunities one didn't. When I finally saved up enough money to go to college, I juggled classes and 2 part-time jobs. Mark, on the other hand, went straight into university with a comfortable savings account I'd built up for him, a car I'd helped buy, and 0 student debt. My resentment, if I'm honest, started as a tiny little seed right there, but I buried it under the satisfaction of being the reliable one, the successful one. Fast forward a few years. I had graduated, taken a corporate job I hated, and was desperately trying to figure out an exit strategy. I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. I saw a gap in the market for specialized, custom-designed industrial components, a boring business to most, but I saw the potential for a high-margin niche. I quit my job, maxed out every credit card I had, and took out a second mortgage on the tiny condo I'd just bought. The early days of the business were pure, unadulterated hell. I was working 18-hour days, sleeping on an air mattress in a rented warehouse space next to the machinery, living off instant ramen and caffeine. The first 3 years were a brutal grind of failures, near bankruptcies, and constant anxiety. Mark, meanwhile, was having the time of his life, traveling with friends, posting perfect-looking Instagram photos from European hostels, and calling me occasionally for advice on his latest dating crisis. He saw my struggle, but he saw it through a glass wall. He'd come by, look at the dust and the chaos, say, "Wow, you're really busy, huh?" and then go back to his life. Then things started to click. One major contract landed, then another. The business, let's call it synergy dynamics, suddenly exploded. Within 5 years, I was profitable enough to hire a small team, move into a proper office, and finally breathe. This is where Mark re-enters the story, but not in the way you might expect. He graduated with a liberal arts degree and was struggling to find a stable job that matched his, shall we say, refined tastes. He called me up, not to congratulate me on my success, but to ask if I had an easy job for him. I saw an opportunity, not just to help my brother, but to bring family into the success I had built. I told him there were no easy jobs, but I had a position for a business development associate. I offered him a generous salary, a comprehensive benefits package, and the promise of growth. He accepted immediately. I thought, this is great. Now we can build this together. For the first year, it was fine. Mark was enthusiastic, if a bit lazy. He was good at schmoozing clients, and I overlooked the fact that he consistently showed up late and took far too many long lunches. I saw it as a temporary thing, something he'd grow out of once he understood the value of hard work. But the entitlement started to creep in. He'd casually suggest expensive office renovations, demand a company car far beyond what his position warranted, and constantly compare his salary to the senior managers who had been with me since the air mattress days. He started telling people, both clients and employees, that he was the co-founder, that the initial success was all his idea, and that he was only letting me run the day-to-day. My patience was wearing thin. The final straw came during a major contract negotiation. I had spent 6 months laying the groundwork, preparing the proposal, and securing the deal. At the celebratory dinner, Mark got drunk, gave a spontaneous, slurred toast where he took 100% of the credit, and managed to insult the CEO's wife in the process. The next morning, the CEO's office called to say they were reconsidering the partnership. I managed to salvage the deal, but it cost me a huge discount and a loss of all respect for Mark. I fired him that day. It was the hardest decision of my life, but I couldn't let him sabotage everything I had worked for. Now, you'd think that would be the end of it, right? A clean break. A lesson learned.
Wrong.
Mark went nuclear. He started spreading rumors about me in the industry, telling our parents and extended family that I had betrayed him and stolen his rightful place in the company. He truly, deeply believed he was owed a piece of my success simply because he was my brother. And then, the certified letter arrived, a notice of intent to sue, claiming he had an oral partnership agreement and was demanding 50% equity in Synergy Dynamics, plus back pay for the undercompensated years. My stomach dropped. I hired the best corporate lawyer I could find, and thus began the long, agonizing path to mediation. So that's the situation I was in. I was sitting there listening to my younger brother, the man whose life I'd subsidized, whose career I'd tried to launch, whose toxic entitlement was now threatening to dismantle my entire livelihood, demand half of my life's work. The mediator had just confirmed Mark's outlandish demand. The air was thick with tension, and my lawyer was practically shaking his head in silent disbelief. Mark was completely convinced he had me cornered. He knew I hated conflict, and he was banking on the fact that I'd settle just to make the whole mess go away. But this wasn't just about money. This was about justice and the value of hard work versus the poison of entitlement. I had spent countless nights planning for this specific moment, and I knew I couldn't let him win. Before I tell you what happened next, what I showed them, and how it all blew up, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have settled just to save the relationship? Or would you have fought fire with fire? Tell me, what would your final move be? I took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the tension build for what felt like an eternity. Mark was actually smiling, a smug, contemptuous smirk that made my blood boil. Mark, I said, my voice dangerously level. You claim that you are owed half of this company because of an alleged oral agreement, and because, in your words, you contributed equally to the founding and subsequent success? He nodded sharply, crossing his arms. That's right. The partnership was always implied. Implied, I repeated, tasting the word. Well, I don't deal in implied. I deal in paperwork and proof. I leaned forward, keeping eye contact with him as I slowly reached into my briefcase. I pulled out a single, neatly folded document. It wasn't a contract or a bank statement or even a sworn affidavit. It was a promissory note, a simple, one-page document signed 4 years earlier, witnessed and notarized. I placed it in front of the mediator first. The mediator, a stoic woman named Miss Chun, adjusted her glasses and began to read. As she read, her expression shifted from professional neutrality to profound surprise. She slid the document over to Mark's lawyer, who scanned it quickly, and then finally, with a shaky hand, Mark's lawyer pushed it towards my brother. The document was a promissory note for the initial capital investment. Remember how I said I maxed out my credit cards and took a second mortgage to start the company? That was true. But I had forgotten one small detail that had haunted me at the time. My parents, wanting to help, had offered their life savings, a paltry $5,000, which I politely declined because I couldn't risk their financial security. But Mark, seeing my desperation, had come to me just before I signed the second mortgage papers. He had $15,000 saved up from summer jobs and my college graduation gift money I had essentially given him in the first place, but money that was legally his. He saw the risk, he knew I was desperate, and he made me an offer. He would lend me the $15,000, but he made me sign a notarized promissory note. The note clearly stated, loan of $15,000 to my name for business startup capital. The loan is to be repaid in full, with 10% interest, within 3 years. There is no transfer of equity or partnership implied or expressed by this transaction. He had insisted on the 10% interest. He wanted a return on his investment, even from his own brother at my lowest moment. The document was dated, signed by both of us, and sealed by a notary public. Mark read the document. His face didn't just fall, it collapsed. The smug arrogance drained away, replaced by a deep, sickly gray. His hands trembled as he held the paper. That $15,000 loan was the full extent of his financial involvement in the company. He hadn't invested his time, his blood, his sweat, or his sanity. He had invested a short-term, high-interest loan. By demanding 50% of a multi-million-dollar business, he was essentially trying to convert a 10% interest loan into a massive ownership stake, and the document was the irrefutable evidence that no partnership, oral or otherwise, had ever existed. In that one piece of paper, my brother had documented his own mercenary, transactional view of our relationship and my business. He hadn't seen an opportunity to help a brother. He had seen a high-risk, high-reward loan shark move. I waited for the silence to break. Mark's lawyer finally spoke, a quiet, defeated voice. Mark, this document, it significantly undermines the basis of your partnership claim. Mark didn't look at his lawyer. He looked straight at me, his eyes wet with tears, but not tears of shame or remorse, tears of sheer, unbelievable defeat. You kept this, he whispered, his voice cracking. Of course, I kept it, I replied, feeling no satisfaction, just a deep, cold emptiness. It's the contract that defined your relationship with my business, Mark. You demanded it. I then slid a second document across the table. And this is the final check. $16,500. The full principal and interest, repaid in full, exactly as the note requires, plus an additional $1,000 for the stress you caused. The mediation ended right there. Mark's lawyer knew the game was over. The court would never side with an implied partnership claim when a clear, notarized loan agreement existed. Mark stood up, not meeting my eyes, and practically ran out of the room. He didn't say goodbye, he didn't apologize, he just fled. The aftermath was swift. The lawsuit was dropped the next day. Our parents, who had been completely taken in by Mark's emotional manipulation, were forced to confront the truth when I calmly showed them the promissory note. They were devastated, not just by Mark's entitlement, but by his sheer, cold-hearted transactionalism. Our relationship, already severely strained, completely collapsed. I haven't spoken to Mark since that day. Synergy dynamics continued to thrive, but the victory felt hollow. I had saved my business, but I had lost my brother. Or perhaps, I finally accepted that the brother I had always believed in hadn't existed for a very long time. I know I was right legally, and I believe I was right morally. I had to defend the value of my own sacrifice. But every Thanksgiving and Christmas since then, there's an empty chair at the table, and I'm always left wondering if winning the battle was worth losing the war. And that's the whole story. Every agonizing detail of how a single piece of paper, a document my own brother insisted upon, became the ultimate weapon against his own greed. It taught me a bitter lesson about family, success, and the difference between giving and lending. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. I really need to know what you think. Like this video if you are on my side and believe I did the right thing to protect my company and my life's work. Subscribe for more stories like this because sometimes the most shocking dramas play out right in the middle of our own families. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comment section. Did I handle the aftermath correctly? Was my silence toward him necessary? I'll see you all in the next story.